Jenny, you played a specific role in the Australian Science Communicators Network, both in its formation about 20 years ago. You were also president around 2006-2007, and I know that you're still very active. I know that in some countries, including in South Africa, people are thinking about setting up a network like that, where science communicators can share ideas and help each other and share resources and help sort of play a role in making it, building up the profession and encouraging people into the field. Maybe it would really be useful to find out from you, what were your motivations way back to set up the network? How has it panned out? What is the network doing for science communication in Australia, and how do you see its future?
Yes, well, it actually happened, it was actually formed 20 years ago, almost exactly. And we had our 20th anniversary this year at our conference in February 2014. And it came about initially when I was on this overseas study award with CSIRO and visiting Professor Bruce Lowenstein at Cornell University. And he told me about this conference that was happening in Montreal the next year in 1994. And he said, why don't you do something about the Australian scene in science communication, because at that conference people are going to be presenting about what's happening with PCST in each of their countries. And so I I was still on my overseas study award, so I contacted my colleague Tos Gascoigne, and at the time this was pre-internet pretty much, it was only just starting, pre-email, pre-internet. And so Tos wrote lots of letters and faxes, and then when I got back to Australia we both made visits to people, talked to people. And a common question we were asked was, what is this PCST? How can we join it? And does Australia have some sort of group we could join that's interested in science communication? And from that sort of general level of interest, we also found out people had tried to get it started before and it hadn't really got off the ground. But from that general level of interest, TOS convened a meeting of interested people in Canberra in about February 1994, before the Montreal conference, to see if there was interest in forming such an association. And from there it was agreed that this association would be open to everyone. Anyone who was interested in science communication could join. It wasn't just journalists, wasn't just people like me working for science organisations. Even scientists who were interested in science communication could join. And there was a little bit of a struggle with this, because in other countries, you know, science journalists like to keep by themselves without having that interaction. But given our small population, we didn't think that was really feasible. So we started off 20 years ago, and it was also, once we started, we decided to bid for the next conference of the PCST, with the Australian Science Communicators and CSIRO hosting that conference. And I was lucky enough to be on the organising committee as well as on the first committee of the Australian Science Communicators. And so in 1996, in 1994 later that year, we successfully bid to hold the conference in Melbourne. And in 1996, where I first met you, we had our conference in Melbourne, our first conference. And that generated lots of excitement and interest. And over the years, we've had our membership, I think to start off with, we had about 160 foundation members or something, who each paid $20 each to be a foundation member. But since that time, the numbers have grown significantly. We've now got over 500 members in Australia who are members of the Australian Science Communicators. The conference we had in February was probably the best conference we've ever had. We try and have a conference every second year. And one of the reasons it was so good is that we had a mix of researchers and practitioners. And there was an effort at that conference within Australia to bridge that gap. And because of that, there was lots of exciting plenary sessions, parallel sessions. There was a poster competition where I was runner-up. There was a photography competition where I was runner-up. I was a bit disappointed about that. But I think what really helped it get going from 1994 was the advent of email and internet. Because a lot of what happens on Australian Science Communication is virtual. We do have regional branches who try and do regional things, like in Queensland where I live, Brisbane, there's a fairly active branch. In Canberra, there's an active branch. But really, it's a virtual world that makes a difference. And we have an email list, another list where you can send out media releases as an Australian Science Communicator member. But I really personally believe it's a networking that really works well. There's also lots of opportunities through Australian Science Communicators for professional development. So you can go to fairly cheaply priced workshops to learn particular skills that you don't already have, like in social media or whatever it might be. So I think it works on that level for people in Australia. We've had low times, but we've also had lots of high times, and we hosted the 2007 World Conference of Science Journalists when I was president. And although it was a hard road to get that conference going, when it happened, it was fantastic. And
really great.
And we had over 1,000 delegates, I think, at that conference, many of them journalists from around the world. A very exciting event for Australia and for our members.
Now, I know that you are not necessarily an academic, or you are dabbling in the academic side of science communication as well, but not focusing on that exclusively. But from what you've said, you know, that you're also able to attract researchers and practitioners to the Australian Science Communicators Conference. And I know that there's more than one university in Australia where science communication is taught, and it is recognised as an academic discipline. Is that fair to say?
It's becoming more so. We're trying to get the funders to see it as an academic discipline too, so that science communication research can be funded at a proper level. But more and more, it is becoming a discipline. It's often within various departments. For example, my research at the University of Queensland is in the Department of Journalism and Communication, but in Canberra at the Australian National University, the science communicator, they actually have a centre for the public awareness of science, which is attached to the science faculty. So it varies in every sort of university. But more and more, the researchers in Australia are seeing it and trying to promote it as a discipline, and very much interdiscipline, with bringing in lots of things into the discipline. But yeah,
I know that a number of people from South Africa and other countries in Africa have been collaborating, you know, and even studying, either from science centres or from other backgrounds, studying science communication in South Africa. So I hope that both with you and the rest of the network in Australia, we can continue fruitful collaboration and exchange of ideas and resources into the future.
Yes, wonderful. It'd be fantastic.
Thank you.